Are you ready for the next installment of Grandma Hope's moving story? This is the second part, continuing right where we left off. If you haven't seen the first part, stop right now. Click on the card on screen or check the pinned first comment to find part 1. Don't forget to check the cover image and yellow stripe to make sure you're watching the correct video. The secrets that Grandma Hope is about to reveal will leave you breathless until the very last minute. Don't miss it. Leave your trusty like now at the beginning so you don't forget when you're wrapped up in the story. Now, Miss Hope, we're ready to hear from you again. First, I want to thank all of you who returned to hear the rest of my story. It's not easy to relive these memories, but your interest gives me strength to continue. Let me remember where we left off. Ah, yes. We had stopped at that moment when I arrived at Rose's house, the woman who claimed to be my best friend. But the scene I witnessed proved that everything we experienced together was nothing but a big lie. I saw that shameless woman sitting naked on my husband's lap like a mad woman. The two of them were talking about the most indecent things. Alex was squeezing her waist with an intensity and desire he hadn't shown me in a long time. I felt as if my legs had been amputated because they weakened so suddenly that I ended up falling to the ground. The bags I was carrying hit the floor hard, making noise. They must have heard because a commotion started inside the house. I heard a chair being dragged. Soon they both came out, getting dressed in a hurry, with the most fake expressions when they saw me lying there by the window. When Alex saw me on the ground, he came to help me up. I was about to faint. My voice wouldn't come out. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't even push him away. My belly felt like it was going to explode from how hard it had become at that moment. "Hope, for God's sake," he said, lifting me up. "It's not what you think." I looked at Rose, whom I had considered my best friend for so many years, she couldn't even look me in the eyes. She was adjusting her dress, her face and hair drenched in sweat as she stammered. "I can explain, Hope. Just. They took me inside, sat me on a sofa. They both started talking at the same time, making up excuses, saying it had been the first time, that it had been a mistake, that they were sorry, but I swear I didn't hear anything. I only remember Rose begging me not to tell her husband, but the truth is I was so shocked that I seemed to have entered a world of silence where only that horrible image kept repeating in my head. My best friend, who had consoled me when I told her about Lucy, who said Alex was no good and that I deserved better, was now in bed with him. All those years of friendship, shared secrets, tears and laughter, together everything had been a lie. Had she been with him for a long time? Were they laughing at me behind my back? "I'm going to get a glass of water for her," I heard Alex say, his voice finally penetrating the fog that enveloped my mind. Rose sat next to me, tried to take my hand, but I pulled it away forcefully. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears that I didn't know whether were sincere or just another part of that charade. "I didn't want to hurt you. It was stronger than me." Alex returned with a glass of water, tried to make me drink. I pushed his hand away with a slap, spilling water over both of them. "Don't touch me," I finally managed to say. My voice came out strangled. "Never touch me again." "Hope, think about the baby," he said, as if suddenly he cared. "You need to calm down." "Don't talk about my child," I replied, anger finally overcoming the shock. "You don't have that right, do you, after this?" I stood up with difficulty, feeling a sharp pain in my back. I needed to get out of there, go home, pick up Matthew, think about what to do. But where would I go? How would I support 2 children alone? Oh God, I was at a dead end. "I'll take you home," Alex said, grabbing my arm. "Let go of me. I don't want anything from you." "Don't be silly, Hope," he insisted, gripping my arm tighter. "Look at your condition. You can't go out alone like this." I looked at Rose, who seemed to have shrunk in her chair. "This is what happens when you trust someone," I said, tears now flowing freely down my face. "This is what I get for believing in you, for telling you my secrets, for thinking you were my friend." "I am your friend," she whimpered without convincing even herself. "Friend. A friend doesn't sleep with her friend's husband. A friend doesn't betray like that," I said as I got up on my own, but something that shouldn't have happened, happened. My water broke, and at that very moment, my legs got completely wet. So you can imagine, I had to stay right there. It was madness. The scoundrel ran out to look for the midwife while I was forced to stay there in the bed where my husband had recently been delighting with that mare. Rose turned white as paper when she saw the water running down my legs. 1 minute she was shrinking with shame, the next she had to act there was no choice. She removed the dirty sheets from her bed, the same ones she and Alex had used, and put clean ones she took from the closet. She helped me lie down, now without looking me in the eyes. "Go call Mary," she told Alex. "Run, this baby is coming now." The pains started to get stronger, more frequent. It felt like something was tearing my body from the inside out. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction, but it was difficult. "Breathe deeply, Hope." Rose guided me, pretending a calmness I knew she didn't have. "Remember how it was with Matthew? Try to breathe the same way." I didn't even respond. I just turned my face to the other side. I didn't want to see that fake face. I didn't want her help. But what choice did I have? Alex came running back with Mary, the same midwife who had attended Matthew's birth. I'll tell you the truth, I was terrified, imagining that Mary might be in some consultation and couldn't come. Then I would have to have my child there in her hands. What if she killed me to keep my child and my husband? It might seem exaggerated, a foolishness, but I really thought that. At that moment, with so much pain and betrayal, my head was boiling with bad thoughts. "Let's get to it then," Mary said, rolling up her sleeves. "This little one is in a hurry." The pains were getting stronger, more frequent. Mary looked between my legs and nodded. "She's dilating quickly. I think this one will be born easier than the first. He's engaged." Alex stayed in the living room, as was customary. Men didn't attend births in those days. Rose tried to help, taking my hand, but I pulled it away forcefully. "I don't need you," I said through gritted teeth. "You've done enough." Mary's eyes widened. Suddenly, we heard loud knocks on the front door. Rose and I exchanged a frightened look. Who could it be at this hour? The door opened even before anyone could answer it. It was Grandma Dorothy. With one hand, she pushed the stroller where Matthew was sitting playing with the toy car his father had made, not understanding anything that was happening. "Hope, I was going crazy with worry," Grandma said, her eyes wide open seeing me in that situation. "I went to the market to look for you. I asked everyone, until Mrs. Laura from the fruit stand said she'd seen you come to Rose's house." Grandma entered the room like a hurricane. Her eyes quickly scanned the entire scene. Me lying in Rose's bed, sweating with pain from contractions. Rose standing in a corner, uncomfortable, trying to make herself invisible, and Alex sitting in the living room, feigning a concern that must have been false. The expression on her wrinkled face changed instantly. Her lips tightened into a thin line, and those eyes that had seen almost everything in this life seemed to see beyond appearances, beyond lies. She understood that something was very wrong there, without anyone having to explain it to her. She always had that gift, as long as I can remember, of capturing things in the air, of sensing truths that no one spoke. Her eyes went from Alex to Rose, and then to me, silently communicating that she knew exactly what had happened there. "I'm going to take care of my granddaughter now," she told Mary with a firmness that left no room for discussion. Then she turned to Alex. "Take Matthew to the living room and stay there with him. A child doesn't need to see this." Alex, who seemed a bit lost between the birthing situation and the recent scene, simply obeyed and took my little boy to the living room. Grandma took off the shawl she always wore, rolled up the sleeves of her worn dress, and went straight to the midwife's side. "Is the labor advanced?" she asked Mary, already taking a clean cloth from her bag to dry my face. "It's going fast," the midwife replied. "This girl has always been strong." Grandma Dorothy leaned over me, her eyes now filled with a love and concern that only a grandmother could have. "Everything will be all right, my child," she whispered, taking my hand firmly. "Grandma is here now." And with her there, despite everything, I ended up forgetting what I had just witnessed and used all my energy to bring my little one into the world. The labor was faster than with Matthew, but no less painful. After about 3 hours of pushing, feeling like I was splitting in half, I finally heard the crying. "It's a boy," announced Mary, lifting a red, wrinkled baby who was crying and screaming with all his might. Grandma Dorothy cried when she saw her great-grandson. They cut the umbilical cord, cleaned the little one, and put him on my chest. Rose approached, smiling at the baby, and I, although exhausted, managed to shout, "Get away from him." She went away, all ashamed. Grandma and Mary looked at each other and said nothing. I, even with my heart broken by everything I had discovered in the last few hours, felt an immense love for that little creature. "His name will be Samuel," I said, touching his little head, which already had a bit of black hair. Alex entered the room with eyes wide open at seeing his son. He wanted to hold him, but Grandma Dorothy stood between us. "Let the mother and child rest a bit," she said, firm but polite. "You'll have time later." I noticed Alex's surprise at Grandma Dorothy's attitude. He didn't expect that. Samuel was born strong and healthy, despite being a month before expected. He also inherited his father's blue eyes. I tried to breastfeed him, which thank God I managed, and he nursed as soon as I put him to my breast. Matthew, now with his 3 years, came to meet his little brother. He thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Grandma Dorothy brought him after everything had calmed down. My oldest son came in on tiptoe, curious. He put his finger to his mouth, making a pouting face, saying, "Shh," he spoke in whispers. I think Alex taught him that. Matthew stretched out his finger and lightly touched his brother's hand, who by reflex grabbed it. My oldest son opened such a big smile that it looked like it would tear his face. It was the first genuine joy I felt on that difficult day. "He likes me," Matthew said, all proud. Seeing my 2 sons together for the first time was like a balm for my wounded heart. At that moment, despite all the pain and betrayal, I felt that I still had reasons to keep going. By then, Rose's husband had arrived. Paul entered the house with a face tired from work at the pharmacy, with no idea of the drama that was happening there. He seemed like a lost little animal, looking confused at all those people in his house, at me lying in bed with a newborn baby. With the greatest pretense, everyone greeted each other as if nothing had happened. Paul shook Alex's hand, congratulating him on the birth of the baby. Rose gave her husband a kiss, and I remained silent in bed, observing it all with a lump in my throat. I felt very sorry for Paul. He loved that. He worked hard at his father's pharmacy, saving every penny to give her a better life. It was Grandma Dorothy who, with that wisdom, perceived my discomfort. "Come on, Hope. It's time to take you and the child home," she said firmly. "We'll go slowly. Rest when you get there." I asked Grandma to help me get up. My legs were still shaking. My whole body ached, but I wanted to get out of that house as quickly as possible. The scoundrel, Alex, now in the role of concerned husband, went along helping to carry Matthew's stroller and the shopping bags I had made before. Rose, uncomfortable, tried to offer to help, but Grandma Dorothy pushed her away with a look that said it all, those grandmother eyes that seemed to see people's souls. When we were finally leaving, I felt a twinge of satisfaction that I'll never forget. That disgusting Rose's bed had been left all stained with blood, water, and everything else my labor had caused. The white sheets she was so proud of were now unusable. Let her figure out how to wash all that dirt, or throw them away or burn them, I didn't care. It was the least she could do after what she had done to me. Poor Paul. He still insisted on calling his father to examine me, but Mary assured him that everything was fine, that the child was born healthy, and that I just needed rest. And I heard Alex apologizing to Mary, saying he couldn't pay her at that moment, that he would owe her. I pretended not to hear. Thinking, what do you mean he doesn't have money? Grandma Dorothy decided to stay with me that night. My whole body ached. I had just given birth, and my soul was shattered after everything I had discovered. Alex, as soon as we got home, went straight to take a bath, avoiding looking me in the eyes. Grandma prepared the bed for me, made a peppermint tea, which she said was good for cleansing me inside after the birth and to make my milk come in more. It wasn't long before everyone arrived homey. Mom, my brother, and my dad. Only Lucy didn't come, and I knew well why. They arrived worried because Grandma Dorothy wasn't returning. It was already getting dark, and nobody knew where she was. When they saw Samuel, it was a celebration. "But wasn't the baby supposed to be born next month?" asked Mom, taking her grandson in her arms. "He came early, but thank God he's perfect," I replied without going into details about the circumstances of the birth. Dad, after seeing his grandson, stayed quiet in a corner, as always, but I noticed he was looking around, searching for Alex. Grandma Dorothy noticed it too, and exchanged a meaningful look with him that I didn't understand at that moment. Michael was playing with Matthew, making him laugh out loud, a joy in the midst of that situation. Michael started telling me that he had his eye on Monica, a neighbor of Mom's. He said he wanted to date her. I knew her since she was little pretty, beloved. I encouraged him. Conversation flowing, conversation going. I even forgot about Alex. When everyone was leaving, late at night, I realized he wasn't home. He had left without notice, without saying where he was going. I thought he must be afraid that I would tell everything I saw. I finally fell asleep, too exhausted to worry about his whereabouts. Grandma Dorothy stayed with us. She said she would spend that week with me there, even asked my brother to bring her some clothes the next day. Alex had disappeared, and, as far as I was concerned, he could stay away as long as he wanted. I fell asleep quickly, overcome by fatigue. I don't know how much time passed, maybe an hour after the family left. I woke up frightened by the sound of the door opening forcefully. I saw that the living room light was coming through the half-open door. When I opened my eyes with difficulty due to the brightness, I was scared. It was Alex, all bloody, being carried by Grandpa David. "My God, what happened?" I screamed, approaching slowly. Alex had a swollen face, a cut on his eyebrow that was bleeding a lot, his shirt torn and stained red. His grandfather David helped him sit in a chair. "Calm down, woman. Don't wake up the children." The old gravedigger spoke, glancing towards the room, where fortunately they hadn't woken up with the noise. Grandma Dorothy jumped up startled and began to examine Alex's wounds. "What happened to him?" I insisted. His grandfather David didn't want to tell me the reason. He was beating around the bush, saying it had been a fight, that Alex had fallen, things that made no sense, until he finally let it out. "It was your father who did this to him." I understood everything instantly and said, "It was because of Lucy, wasn't it?" His grandfather David remained silent, with his gaze lowered, confirming what I already knew. Alex, moaning in pain while Grandma cleaned the cut on his eyebrow, began to ask me for forgiveness. "Forgive me, Hope. I didn't mean to. But now it's over, I swear. Your father almost killed me. He said if he sees me near your sister again, he'll finish the job." Alex spoke with difficulty. Each word seemed to cost him an enormous effort. Then he said something that froze my blood. "I'll have to leave, Hope. I can't stay here. I'll go to New York City, back to my parents' house. When things calm down, I'll send for you and the children." Grandma, who had been quiet until then, cut into the conversation. "What are you doing with your life, boy? All this for what? To now run away like a coward? I told you, Hope, that this boy carried the devil's shadow." The moment Grandma said that, I swear to God, the lights in the living room flickered. It wasn't my imagination. Everyone saw it. My skin broke out in goosebumps. A shiver ran down my spine. Grandma Dorothy made the sign of the cross on her chest. Alex seemed to shrink in the chair where he was sitting. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue, to fight, as he always did when contradicted. But instead, he simply lowered his head. "You're right," he told Grandma. "I've done everything wrong, but now it's too late." He got up with effort, went to the closet, and began to collect his things, sorted out the documents, wrapped it all in a bag, and turned to me. "I'm sorry, Hope, for everything. You deserved better. Whatever you hear about me, believe me, I've always loved you and I'll always love you. You're the only woman I love." He went to the crib, looked at Samuel, who was sleeping peacefully, then at Matthew in the bed. His eyes filled with tears. "I'll send you news and money when I can." I couldn't say anything. Part of me wanted to scream, to hit him, to throw him out of there. Another part, that foolish part, that still loved the man I had known for years, wanted to ask him to stay, to try again, but I remained silent. The words had dried up in my throat. After he left with his grandfather, disappearing into the darkness of the night, I was so sad, so devastated. I had never felt so much pain in my life. If you could see my heart at that moment, it would surely be dust, all shattered. Thank goodness Grandma was there. She didn't say anything, but she helped me with the children because honestly, I wasn't in a condition to take care of them. The next day, my whole body ached. It was a mixture of pain from childbirth and pain from the soul. Samuel was nursing well, thank God, and Matthew was behaving well, perhaps sensing something was wrong. He wanted his dad. Grandma Dorothy took care of everything, the food, cleaning me, the children. I wondered how I would manage without her when she left. At the end of the afternoon, my brother Michael appeared to bring Grandma's things. He had gotten off work and had stopped by Mom's house. He arrived with a bundle of Grandma's clothes, as she had asked him. I was lying in the bedroom nursing Samuel. I heard voices in the living room. Our living room was next to the kitchen, everything small and cramped. I could easily hear what was being said. Michael and Grandma Dorothy were speaking in low voices. By the tone, I realized it was something serious. I managed to put Samuel in the crib without waking him and approached the door that was ajar. They thought I was asleep. "I've never seen Dad like that," Michael was saying. It seemed like he had turned into a beast. "And Lucy?" asked Grandma. "How is she?" "All beaten up. Dad had no mercy. He gave her a beating. He said he was going to teach her to respect her own family." I couldn't bear to just listen. I opened the door suddenly, and they both got scared, stopping talking instantly. "What happened to Lucy? What did Dad do?" I asked with my heart beating hard. Michael tried to pretend. "Don't hide anything from me, Michael. It's my husband, my sister, my family too. I have the right to know." Grandma Dorothy shook her head, displeased. "Leave it, child. You just had a baby. You're breastfeeding. That kind of nervousness dries up the milk. It's bad for the baby." But I wasn't going to let that pass in any way. Alex had gone, had abandoned his family, and I needed to know exactly why. "Tell me everything, Michael," I insisted, gripping his arm tightly. "Everything." My brother looked at Grandma as if asking for permission. She sighed deeply with that manner of someone who knows there's no use fighting against certain things. "Tell her then," she finally said. "But don't embellish it. Don't hide it. Don't exaggerate it. Just say what you saw with your own eyes." Michael led me to the kitchen table, made me sit down. "Grandma brought a glass of water with sugar so I wouldn't get dizzy," she said. My brother began to speak with great difficulty, choosing his words, sometimes stopping to breathe. "It was last night, after we left here. When we got home," Michael paused, took a sip of my water and continued. "Suddenly, we heard strange noises coming from Dad and Mom's bedroom, moans, muffled laughter. Dad went right away, went over there, and flung the door open. And there they were. My heart was in my mouth. I already imagined what was coming. But even so, hearing it was like receiving a punch in the stomach. The two of them were. They were in Dad and Mom's bed." Michael spoke, lowering his gaze ashamed. "Lucy and Alex, the two of them naked doing that." I almost fainted right there. Grandma Dorothy held me by the shoulders strongly, keeping me seated. "Dad went crazy," Michael continued, now speaking quickly, as if he wanted to finish quickly with that. "He grabbed Alex by the hair, threw him to the floor, started hitting him, kicking him. Lucy was screaming, tried to pull Dad away, but he gave her a slap that sent her flying. He said he was going to teach her to be a decent woman and continued beating her too. My God, was all I could say. The neighbors heard the screams, came to see what was happening. Mom was trying to separate them, but Dad was beside himself. Lucy received many blows. Alex tried to react, but Dad is strong. He even grabbed a stick that was leaning against the wall. My brother stopped, took a deep breath. I noticed his eyes were teary. I had an asthma attack. I couldn't breathe well in the middle of all that confusion. Mom had to help me, get me out of there. I didn't have the strength to help separate them, Hope. "And after that?" I asked, my voice barely coming out. "After that, his grandfather David arrived. Someone must have warned him. He managed to intervene, to restrain Dad. He took Alex away. Dad was shouting that if he saw him around there again, he would kill him. And he seemed to mean it. I almost fell off the chair. Grandma held me, made me drink more sugar water. My head was spinning, my stomach upset. "And Lucy?" I asked after a while. "She's in bed at home, all beaten up. Mom is taking care of her, but hardly speaks to her. She's ashamed." Everyone in the neighborhood found out. The worst of all was imagining that scene in our parents' bed. Alex, my husband, with Lucy, my little sister, whom I myself had helped raise. That was too much for me. At that moment I understood why Alex had decided to leave. It wasn't just because of my father, who could really fulfill his threat to kill him. It was because now the whole town knew. The scandal had formed. Gossip must already be running through the streets. "That's why he had to flee," I murmured, more to myself than to the others. "It's better this way," said Grandma Dorothy firmly. "A man who doesn't respect his own family doesn't deserve to have a family." Well, now things happened in a way that I and our entire family suffered a lot. More than a week later, Grandma Dorothy said I should register my son. "You can't leave the child without documents, Hope. It's his right to have a name." I knew she was right. In those days, in '68, the law said that the child had to be registered by the father or, in his absence, by the mother. I had to gather my courage and go to the city registry office. I carried Samuel wrapped in a blanket. It was cold those days. Grandma stayed with Matthew at home. When I got there, Mr. Anthony, the secretary, looked at me with that face of someone who already knew everything. "Mrs. Hope," he said with a serious voice, "you've come to register the child." "Yes," I replied, gathering my courage. "And the father?" he asked, knowing full well the answer. "He's gone." Mr. Anthony cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses on his nose. "You know that by law, if you're legally married, even if the husband isn't present, the child is automatically considered his, right? His name will appear as the father. That's how it was. If the woman was married, the child she had was presumed to be her husband's. They called it presumption of paternity. Even if the man had left, even if everyone knew he wasn't the real father, on paper his name would appear. "I'll need the marriage certificate," said the secretary. Fortunately, Grandma Dorothy had reminded me to bring it. I handed him the paper. Mr. Anthony filled out the registry book with the fountain pen, asked me to sign, stamped it, and gave me Samuel's birth certificate. "Samuel Foster," he read aloud, "son of Hope Rivers Foster and Alex Foster, born on the 15th of September, 1968. When I left the registry office, I felt so much sadness. I never imagined I would go through that. On the way back home, I passed by St. Mary's Church. I thought about going in to pray, to ask for strength, but the gossips were all at the door whispering. When they saw me, they fell silent, looking at me with those judgmental eyes. The scandal had spread. Everyone in town already knew about Alex with Lucy, about my father almost killing him, everything. I felt my face burning with shame, held Samuel against my chest and went forward, without looking to the sides. I wondered, what if they knew about Alex with Rose? A few days later, Mom came to visit us. She was dejected, thinner, with deep circles under her eyes from someone who hadn't slept well in a long time. Her face seemed to have aged years in just a few weeks. "Your father never went back to work at the cemetery after what happened," she said in a low voice, almost in a whisper. "David doesn't even want to see him around there, and rightly so." We sat in the kitchen while Grandma Dorothy prepared a strong coffee on the stove. Mom continued to unburden herself. "He spends the entire day sleeping and all night at Louie's bar. He comes home at dawn drunk, saying nonsense. All the money that's left he spends on whiskey. I'm worried, Mom," she told Grandma Dorothy, her eyes already teary. "My husband is wasting away before my eyes, and the worst part is that there's no work for him in this town anymore. After the scandal and the fight, who's going to give work to a man with a reputation for violence?" Grandma Dorothy shook her head while serving the coffee. I warned you, Catherine, from the beginning. I warned you, she spoke with that voice that wasn't accusatory, but of someone who carried ancestral wisdom. I said that the place of the living is not near a cemetery. That house has always had a shadow. Mom, for the first time in so many years, didn't contradict Grandma. On the contrary, she lowered her head and nodded. You were right, Mom. We shouldn't have moved to that house, behind the cemetery, nor agreed to sew those burial shrouds. It seems that since we set foot there, misfortune has haunted us. The situation was becoming unsustainable. Between Alex's betrayal with my sister, his subsequent flight, and now the birth of little Samuel, I felt like the weight of the world was falling on my shoulders. Not only did I have to deal with my broken heart, but also with the responsibility of raising 2 children alone in an environment where everyone knew our disgrace. Every time I went out on the street, I felt the looks and whispers behind my back. It wasn't fair for my children to grow up in that toxic environment. Mom and I paid rent, and sooner or later we wouldn't have money to maintain 2 roofs. Me with 2 small children, without a husband, without expected income. Dad unemployed, spending what little he had on drink. It was then that Mom and Grandma made a decision that would change our lives forever: to leave town. There's nothing for us here anymore, daughter, said Mom, taking my hands with a strength I didn't expect from those thin fingers. The gossip will never end. Your father won't find work. You won't be able to raise your children with everyone pointing at them, talking behind their backs. Lucy can't stay here either. She's already the talk of the town. No one will want to marry her. She's ruined. But where will we go? I asked, frightened by the idea of leaving the only place I knew. From our old city, I remembered very little. Grandma Dorothy, who until then had been stirring her spoon in the coffee thoughtfully, raised those eyes that always seemed to see beyond what was in front of her. I have a cousin in New York City, she said firmly. Helena, it's a big city there. Nobody knows anybody. Can we start over? With a clean name. Your mother knows how to sew well. You too. In the capital, there's always work for a good seamstress. And the children? I asked, looking at my children, thinking about how it would be to raise 2 small children in an unknown city. New York City has more opportunities for them, Mom replied with a glimmer of hope in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. More school, more future, away from all this history. It was hard to hear that, but she was right. In those days, in a small town, a scandal like this marked the family forever. It wasn't just about me, it was also about the future of my children. And Dad, and Michael, and Lucy? I asked, imagining what it would be like to get them all out of there. We'll all go, Grandma replied with a determination that made anyone obey. Your father will go, even if I have to take him tied up. Michael is already old enough to work. He can learn a better trade in New York City. And Lucy, she paused, bringing her hand to the rosary she always carried in her pocket, needs a firm hand. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, I lay looking at the cracked ceiling of the house, thinking about everything. About the life I had imagined for myself when I married Alex, about the dreams I had built, all turned to dust in such a short time. But when I turned to the side and saw Matthew sleeping next to Samuel's crib, both so innocent, so oblivious to the hurricane that had devastated our family, I knew that Grandma and Mom were right. There was nothing left for us in that town. The house near the cemetery had brought the bad luck that Grandma Dorothy always predicted. It was time to turn the page and start anew, away from that white wall, away from the burial shrouds, away from the blue eyes that once bewitched me. The move happened faster than I had imagined. I hadn't set foot in my mother's house for a week. I couldn't face Lucy after everything that had happened. It was Grandma Dorothy who came to tell me the plans one afternoon when Samuel had a fever, and she appeared with a peppermint tea she said was miraculous. I found Helena's address, my cousin from New York City. Grandma told me, while putting cold compresses on my son's forehead. We've exchanged letters for years. Your mother knows. The last news I had from her was about 4 years ago, but I have the address saved. The envelope was already yellowish, folded and refolded in so many parts that it almost fell apart in Grandma's wrinkled hands. The cursive writing, already a bit faded by time, indicated a street in the Chelsea neighborhood of New York City. "We're going there, child," Grandma said with that determination that no one questioned. I didn't notify her that we're coming. I don't even know if the address is still the same, but it's our only way out. I opened my eyes wide, scared by the boldness of the plan. But Grandma, what if she's not there anymore? What if she doesn't want to receive us? We didn't even send a message saying we might come. Grandma Dorothy shook her head, adjusting the shawl over her thin shoulders. In life, sometimes, you have to launch yourself into the darkness, Hope. Staying here is dying little by little. I prefer to take a risk. And family is for these things. We sold what little we had in the following day's clothes, some furniture, even the ring Alex gave me that I still wore out of habit. I had that used Singer sewing machine that I had been able to buy when I still lived with Alex. It was a simple machine, one of those pedal ones that I bought second-hand from Mrs. Josephine when she moved to her daughter's house. It wasn't one of the best, but it helped me earn a little extra money by sewing on the side. I ended up selling it for less than half of what I paid. We needed every dollar for the trip. Mom, however, didn't get rid of her Singer sewing machine in any way. This machine is our livelihood, and it was my mother-in-law who gave it to me. May God rest her soul. Without it, we are lost in the big city, she said, rejecting all offers. That black Singer was wrapped in old sheets and tied with thick ropes like a sacred treasure for the journey. We gathered every penny we could and bought the bus tickets to New York City. I remember that cold November dawn, with that cold that still resisted disappearing, despite winter approaching. When we huddled in the small bus station, each with our bundle of clothes, eyes heavy with sleep and unshed tears, the children slept on our laps, oblivious to the desperation that pushed us away. Dad came almost dragged, unwillingly, but he came. Since the scandal, he barely spoke. He spent his days drinking and nights wandering around the house like a lost soul. He already had that strong smell of a drunkard and smoker. He had lost so much weight that his clothes seemed to belong to another man. Grandma Dorothy had been firm with him. "Jack, either you come with us willingly, or you'll lose what's left of your family. Do you want to die alone, drowned in whiskey?" The bus was old, with broken seats and a smell of mold that permeated everything. The journey would be long, 2 days and 1 night on the road, with stops to eat and stretch our legs. We arranged our places, Grandma Dorothy with Mom and Matthew, Dad alone in a corner, leaning against the window, me with Samuel in the middle seat, Michael on the other side of the aisle, with a funeral face that broke the heart. He was the last to get on the bus. We almost missed the trip because of him. He had disappeared from home the night before. We all knew he had gone to say goodbye to Monica, Mr. Gerald's daughter. He was devastated. My brother had started dating her after a long time, convincing her father, who was very strict, and now he had to abandon everything. "I'll come back someday," he repeated, holding a blue ribbon she had given him as a memento. He said he would write to her. He told me about it at one of the stops, sitting beside me while we ate a heart-of-stone bologna sandwich. His teary eyes reflected the dim lights of the restaurant. "But I know it will be difficult. Her father will find her another boyfriend, one from right there. I don't even know if it's worth trying." Lucy stayed alone at the back, as if she needed to keep her distance from all of us, and we from her. Throughout the trip, I didn't exchange a single word with my sister. I couldn't even look at her. As much as I tried, I could only see her and Alex together in my parents' bed. What audacity! It was on the second day of travel, when we stopped at a roadside bus station, one of those with an improvised restaurant and always clogged bathrooms, that I noticed something strange about her. Lucy ran to the bathroom as soon as we got off and stayed too long in there. When she returned, she was pale, with a sweaty forehead, holding onto the wall to keep from falling. Mom, always attentive, even with all the sadness, went after her, concerned, and returned minutes later, with an expression that said it all. "She's pregnant," she whispered to Grandma Dorothy when they sat on the cement bench at the bus station, believing I was too far away to hear them. "She has morning sickness. There's no way to hide it. She must be about 2 months along already." The world spun around me. What? This was all I needed. She was expecting a child from my husband. The ground seemed to sink beneath my feet. Anger rose hot up my throat, mixed with a pain that seemed to have no end. I wanted to cross that dirty bus station and hit her face until my fingers hurt. A child of Alex's. I didn't go and scratch her face with my nails only because I already carried my own child in my arms. How brazen! Grandma Dorothy, with that gift of reading minds she always had, approached me and gripped my shoulder tightly. "Let it be, child," she said in a low voice, her deep eyes looking into mine. "God doesn't give us a cross heavier than we can bear." Dad, who was leaning against the wall, smoking a cigarette and observing everything with those empty eyes, heard the conversation even from a distance. I saw his whole body tense, and something in that beaten face lit up again, an anger so intense it seemed like he was going to explode. He put out the cigarette with his hand and advanced towards Lucy, who was sitting alone near the luggage. Michael and Mom had to run to stop him, while the other passengers and people at the bus station looked on scared. "Haven't you done enough already? Do you want to kill her?" Mom pleaded in a low voice, standing between Dad and Lucy, who was now crying, huddled on the bench. "Look, that trip was very tense. It was 3 days and 2 nights of travel. The time was longer than they told us. The bus broke down once. We were stranded in the middle of nowhere for hours until they fixed it. The children cried from tiredness, from hunger. I hardly slept at night, for fear that Dad would try to do something to Lucy, or that she would try to run away. Where to, I don't know. When we finally arrived in New York City, the impact was great. We had never seen so many people, so much noise, so many buildings. The city seemed to have no end. It extended in all directions until out of sight. At the Port Authority bus terminal, even dirtier and noisier than the others we had passed through, Grandma Dorothy took from her pocket the paper with her cousin Helena's address. It was so wrinkled and dirty that it could barely be read. A porter passing by offered to help us understand where it was. "Chelsea? It's far from here. You with all that luggage and small children won't get there by bus," he said, looking at our disheveled and exhausted family. "I know a guy who does shuttle rides with a van. It's not expensive and you'll all fit." The van man, Mr. Jr., appeared half an hour later. The van was old and smoking, but it fit all our luggage, Mom's heavy Singer sewing machine, and the whole family crammed into the seats. The ride wasn't cheap, but it was still our only option. Mr. Jr. complained about the weight, especially the machine, but he was a good-hearted man. He had no difficulty finding the address. When we finally arrived at the street indicated on the paper, it was almost night. House number 43 was small, looked humble. Grandma Dorothy, with that courage she always had, was the first to get off and walk to the door. She arranged her worn dress, the shawl over her shoulders, and clapped her hands. We stayed inside the van, watching with our hearts in our throats. She was our only contact in that huge city. If it went wrong, we didn't know what to do. A woman in her 40s opened the door, looking distrustfully at Grandma Dorothy. Then she looked at the van full of people and luggage. Her expression was of someone who wasn't expecting visitors. "Yes?" she asked, keeping her distance. "I'm looking for Helena." "I'm Dorothy, her cousin from upstate." We exchanged letters. The woman frowned and her face transformed into an expression that mixed surprise and sadness. "Dorothy? Are you the Dorothy from the letters?" she asked, now coming closer. My God. A visible relief took over Grandma's tired shoulders. At least she knew her. "You don't know? My mother passed away 4 years ago. It was as if the ground disappeared beneath our feet. Our only hope, our only connection in that huge and frightening city had died 4 years ago." Grandma Dorothy, always so strong, staggered a bit, needing to lean on the door. Mr. Jr., impatient, honked the horn to remind us that he had more to do. We all got off not knowing what to do. Our suitcases piled on the narrow sidewalk. The woman perceived our desperation and, in a gesture of kindness I'll never forget, opened the door wider. "I'm her daughter. Aparecida. Helena's daughter," she clarified, pointing to the letter my grandmother held in her wrinkled hands. We looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Aparecida, Helena's daughter, looked at our suitcases, at the tired children. "You come from far away, don't you?" she asked, and before we could answer, she continued, "Come in, let's talk inside. A cup of coffee will help us think about what to do," while my mother, Catherine, prepared the table for dinner with Aparecita's help. I observed how these two women, so different and unknown to each other until a few hours ago, already worked together as if they were lifelong family. The solidarity between women has always seemed to me a silent miracle, a force that crosses borders and differences. And so, through the kindness of a stranger who was our only family in that big city, we took the first step in what would be our new beginning. I remember entering that unfamiliar house with Samuel in my arms and Matthew clinging to my skirt, thinking that maybe, just maybe, we could start a new life there. The first days in New York City were overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the different accent people had here, everything felt foreign. Matthew would ask me when we were going back home, and I didn't know how to explain to him that this was our home now. The city seemed to swallow us whole, its endless streets, the constant honking of cars, vendors shouting to sell their wares. At night, I would lie awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds, wondering if we had made a terrible mistake. But slowly, day by day, we started to adapt. Matthew made friends with neighbor children. Samuel began to thrive in this new environment, and I found comfort in the anonymity the big city provided. Nobody knew our story here. Nobody whispered behind our backs. We could reinvent ourselves, be whoever we wanted to be. In the middle of all that chaos, we found a strange kind of peace. The house was modest, but clean and orderly. A small living room with a floral fabric sofa already worn, lace curtains on the windows, some plants in clay pots, crocheted rugs and towels everywhere. She said her cousin Helena made them. The smell of freshly brewed coffee already filled the environment. It came from the kitchen, where Aparecita had rushed to put more water in the coffee maker. "My mom always talked about her cousin Dorothy," she said, while serving coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Matthew. "She kept all the letters in a special box. When she got sick, she asked me to answer the last one you sent, but I think I never sent it. Forgive me for that." As we drank that coffee, the best I had tasted after so many days on the road, we told our story. Not everything, of course, just enough for her to understand that we were desperate, with nowhere to go, in a city where we knew no one. "You can stay here until you get settled," Aparecita said after hearing everything. "The house isn't big, but we'll manage. There's a small room in the back where I used to keep my mom's things. I can empty it for you." And my two sons arrived later from work. She had barely finished speaking when we heard the sound of keys in the door. Two young men entered, one taller and thinner, about 25 years old, and another younger, maybe 22, with broad shoulders like someone who does heavy work. The two stopped at the door, surprised by the living room full of strangers. "My sons," Aparecita quickly explained. "The oldest is Sergio. He works in a factory in New York City nearby. The youngest is Benito. He's in construction." The young men greeted everyone, still confused, while Aparecita explained our situation. Sergio was quieter, just nodding in silence. Benito had an easy smile. Soon he was playing with Matthew, who hid behind my legs. I remember my grandmother talking about her cousin Dorothy. Benito said after understanding everything, "It's okay, Mom. If you want to help, we help too." The first days were a real commotion distributing so many people in that small house. The little room at the back was emptied in a hurry. It was little more than a storage room, but we put 2 mattresses on the floor. Aparecita lent us one from the neighbor. In the first week, Sergio said they needed a salesperson at the factory where he worked. Mr. Jack could try, he suggested during dinner. No experience needed. Just talk to the customer and note down the orders. Reasonable pay. Dad, who had hardly spoken since we arrived, simply shook his head. "I don't like talking to anyone," he replied. The harsh voice of someone who had unlearned how to speak. "I've never been good at that." Everyone at the table looked at each other. It was a blatant lie. Before starting to work at the cemetery with David, Dad was known for being talkative, a storyteller, always animated. It was the cemetery that sucked the life out of him, as Grandma Dorothy always said. And then the scandal finally buried the cheerful man he once was. "Mr. Jack," Benito intervened, There's also a vacancy in the construction warehouse. It's more private, just organizing material, if you prefer. Dad shrugged without answering and went out to smoke in the yard. Mom followed him with her eyes, worried. We all knew we needed money urgently. The few savings we had wouldn't last even a month. The next day, Mom had already put a sign in front of the house. Sewing and alterations done here. The old singer was installed in a corner of the living room and soon began making its characteristic noise day and night. The first job came from the neighbor next door, a lady who needed some dresses fixed up. Then more orders came little by little. I helped Mom with the sewing when the children were asleep. Michael got a job as a delivery boy at a nearby bakery. He earned little, but at least he brought fresh bread every day. Dad, to everyone's surprise, accepted the job at the warehouse that Benito had gotten him. He went every day quietly, with a serious face, did his job well, but didn't mix with anyone. He returned straight home, without stopping at the bar as we feared. The months went by, and everything seemed to be working out slowly. We managed to rent a small house not far from there. It was small, simple, but finally we would have our own space, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom at the back, sharing the yard with 2 other families. The tenement, as they called it, wasn't the place of our dreams, but it was our beginning, our independence. And as time passed, Lucy's belly grew, impossible to hide. Mom got her looser clothes, but none of that helped. At 5 months, it looked like she was carrying a watermelon under her dress. Always pale, always quiet. She spent her days helping Mom with the sewing, with her head down, as if she were ashamed to exist. One night, when everyone had already retired and I was alone in the kitchen arranging the last things, Lucy appeared in the doorway. It was the first time in months that we were alone, face to face. "Hope," she said so low, I could barely hear her. "I wanted to tell you something." I felt my body tense. The anger I had been trying to control for months threatened to resurface. I took a deep breath. I counted to 10, as Grandma Dorothy had taught me. "What is it?" I replied without looking at her, continuing to fold the kitchen towel. "I know you'll never forgive me for what I did. I don't forgive myself," she said with a trembling voice. "But I want you to know that I regret it every day. For hurting you, for tearing our family apart." Now I was looking at her, at that face I once looked at with so much affection. "Why did you do it?" I managed to ask, the question that had tormented me for months. "Why him of all people?" Lucy lowered her gaze, her restless hands on her round belly. "I have no excuse, Hope. I know what I did is unforgivable," she said with a broken voice. "But the truth is, I fell in love with him. I didn't want to. I swear I fought against it. Each day was torture to see you with him, pretending everything was fine." I raised my eyes, surprised by her confession. I didn't expect to hear that. "I know, it doesn't justify it," she continued, now looking me in the eyes. "But I couldn't control what I felt. He made me feel special, said nice things as if I were the only woman in the world." I let out a bitter laugh, without any humor at all. "Do you really think you were special to him? That you were the only one?" I asked, wiping a rebellious tear with the back of my hand. "Alex was a liar, a traitor. He wasn't just with you." Lucy frowned, confused. What? What do you mean?" I hesitated for a moment. I had never told anyone about Rose. It was a wound I kept only for myself, but at that moment I felt she needed to know the whole truth. "Remember Rose, my best friend?" I said, feeling the bitter taste of the words. I caught them together, at her house, in her bed, the bed where she slept with her husband, the same day Samuel was born. Lucy's eyes opened wide with surprise. She covered her mouth with her hands, beginning to cry uncontrollably. "My God, I didn't know. I didn't know," she sobbed, leaning on the table so she wouldn't fall. I thought that it was just me, that he really loved you." I completed. "No, Lucy, he didn't love anyone but himself, not me, not you, not Rose. And who knows how many more besides us. Maybe he doesn't even love his own children." Lucy was crying so much she could barely breathe. Between sobs, she tried to speak. "Forgive me, Hope. Forgive me. I was so stupid, so blind. I believed I was special, that he really loved me, that I had been the only one. For the first time since the scandal, I felt something different from my sister. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding. After all, hadn't I myself been deceived by those same blue eyes, those same sweet words, those same empty promises of that thieving scoundrel? We were all fooled, Lucy. But that doesn't mean you're a saint, since you're not a child. I spoke, drying the tears that wouldn't stop falling. I knew it was wrong, that he was your husband, that I was betraying my own sister. I had a choice, and I made the wrong choice. We stayed in silence for a time that seemed endless. The baby in her belly moved, visible even under the loose dress, and I looked away. It was too difficult to think that there was a sibling of my children, a child of the man I loved. And, honestly, despite everything, still loved. After that conversation, we continued not speaking to each other. Grandma Dorothy used to say that every ending is also a beginning. Maybe she was right. There, far from that cemetery, far from that town where everything fell apart, maybe we could start again. New York City, with all its noise, its hurry, its indifference, gave us what we needed most at that moment. Anonymity, the opportunity to be just one more family struggling to survive. Unlike upstate, where we had Mary, here in the capital everything was in the hospital. I remember the day Lucy started feeling the pains. Mom and Grandma Dorothy took her to the hospital. Dad didn't even know. He was still too hurt with her. I stayed home with the children and Michael. When they returned, they brought in their arms a beautiful child with rosy cheeks and eyes of a blue identical to his father's. The resemblance to Alex was so strong it hurt to look at him. If you put him next to Samuel, they looked like twins. They were so similar, despite the age difference. "I'll call him Antonio Alexander," announced Lucy. Antonio in honor of our father in an attempt to appease things, and Alexander, well, for his father. The first months were difficult. The child cried a lot at night from colic, and in the tenement, with the thin walls, everyone heard him. The neighbors complained. Mom would stand up rocking the little one, while Lucy, exhausted, tried to sleep a bit. My children also woke up with their cousins crying. Dad was getting better little by little. The work in the construction warehouse suited him well. At first it was just good morning and good night, but over time he returned to conversation. One day he came home and told a joke he had heard from a workmate. Everyone at the table fell silent, surprised, until Grandma Dorothy let out that delicious laugh of hers, and the others followed. It seemed that a little bit of the dad from before, that storyteller, had returned, and he and Mom were getting closer little by little too. When Antonio Alexander turned 2, Lucy was already working in a clothing factory there in downtown. She would leave the child with Mom during the day. It was there that she met Nelson, a handsome man with light green eyes, which looked a lot like Alex's. It was no wonder she was interested in him. Nelson didn't have a steady job. He lived from sporadic work, lived in a tenement near downtown. One day he had a lot of money. The next he had nothing, the type of man who spends more time in the bar than at home. Lucy started disappearing on weekends. She said she was doing overtime at the factory, but we all knew she was with him. Little Antonio Alexander stayed with us, Mom, Grandma Dorothy, me and the children, who took care of him. The child already called my mother Mom, from spending so much time with her. One day, Lucy surprised us preparing a small suitcase. "I've come to get my son. I'm leaving," she announced just like that. "What do you mean you're leaving? Where to?" I asked, scared. "I'm going to live with Nelson. We'll get married next month." Mom became desperate. Grandma Dorothy, who always had an opinion on everything, this time was left speechless. Little Antonio Alexander cried, clinging to my mother's legs. He didn't want to leave. He didn't even know his own mother well from how absent she was. "You can't just come like this and take the child. He's used to being here with us," I argued. "Yes, I can. He's my son," she replied dryly, taking the child in her arms, who kicked and cried more. Dad, who had already grown fond of his grandson, didn't even want to see the scene. He went out to the street, probably to drink. It was painful to see history repeating itself. Once again, Lucy thinking only of herself. Nelson was waiting outside, leaning on an old car, with a cigarette in his mouth, his shirt unbuttoned, showing a gold chain on his neck. He looked at us all with indifference, as if we were strangers and not the family that had raised his son for 2 years. After she left with the child, the house was left with a void. Matthew asked about his cousin. Samuel, still small, looked for the other child around the house. Mom cried in hiding. There was a little outfit that Antonio Alexander had forgotten. Mom said she wouldn't wash it so she could always smell her grandson. I confess that I also took that piece of clothing and smelled it sometimes, missing the child. Grandma Dorothy prayed, with the rosary always in her hands, asking for the family and for little Antonio Alexander. Meanwhile, Lucy disappeared for 2 years, didn't send news, didn't bring the child to visit. When she finally reappeared, one Sunday, she was already pregnant again. She came with Nelson and little Antonio Alexander, who almost didn't recognize us. Now she had the airs of a lady, with a new dress and her hair styled. The child calls Nelson Dad, commented Mom afterwards, hurt. He's already forgotten us. It was another wound we had to learn to live with, another absence to get used to. Life always seemed to teach us in the hardest way that people leave, take pieces of us, and we have to move on anyway. Michael also followed his path. At first he still sent letters to Monica, from our town. The first weeks he ran to the post office every day to see if there was a response. When a letter arrived, it was a celebration, but over time the responses became scarce. I think she's moving on with her life, he said one day with a sad smile, and I need to move on with mine. A few months later, he started dating Elena, the daughter of the owner of the workshop where he worked. She was from a Spanish family. The father was as fierce as a bull, but Michael won the old man over with hard work and respect. Soon they got engaged and planned to get married. After 5 years in New York City, that opportunity arose that could change our lives, the opportunity to have our own house. The government was financing social housing through the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, all over America. The neighbor from the tenement, Mrs. Sierra, told me about a housing development they were building in Queens. The next day, I went to the FHA office to see how it worked. It was a set of simple little houses, all the same, with 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen and bathroom, a small backyard that was barely enough to hang clothes. It was far from everything, almost at the end of the subway line. But for someone who lived in a rented tenement, it seemed like a dream. The FHA employee, a man with glasses and a mustache, explained the conditions to me. You need to prove family income, have an employment contract. The financing is for 25 years, with installments that increase according to the minimum wage. I explained to him that I worked as a seamstress, but I didn't have Social Security. And your husband? Are you legally married? He asked. I felt uncomfortable. He left. But we are legally married, yes. The man scratched his mustache. Look, if you're legally married and you get the financing, half of the house would be yours, even if he's absent. You would need a legal separation, a divorce, to ensure that the property wasn't partially his. It was like a bucket of cold water. I had never thought about that. If I bought a house, Alex could appear one day and claim part of it. On the other hand, how would I get divorced if I didn't even know where he was? I returned home with my head spinning. I told everything to the family during dinner. Dad has an employment contract, I suggested. If the house is in his name, we solve this problem with Alex. Dad, who was already better, working stably for years in the construction warehouse, agreed right away. Let's see about that tomorrow. The next day, Dad, Mom and I went to the FHA. Since he had a steady job with an employment contract for more than 4 years, we were able to register. The waiting list was long, but maybe we could get one of the houses. For now, we decided to continue with the registration in Dad's name. Months later, we received the news. We had gotten one of the houses. It would be in his and Mom's name, the home for all of us. The day we received the keys was exciting. Everything was new, except for our furniture, of course. The streets weren't yet completely paved. The neighborhood was under construction, transportation was precarious, almost 2 hours to downtown, but we looked at those walls and saw a future. The years passed too quickly. The little house in Queens, which at first seemed so small for so many people, became increasingly cozy. We expanded the house with one more bedroom. As the children grew up, life continued its rhythm, marked by the distant whistle of the subway, our constant neighbor. But there was something that always left us with our hearts in our hands: the heavy rains. Ah, those rains came with force. Suddenly, the sky would darken and the water would fall like a river. And for those who lived near the subway line like us, the concern was double. I remember well the times the Hudson River overflowed. The water rose quickly, flooding the street, approaching our houses. We would run to lift the furniture, put the most important things up high. It was crazy. The neighbors would help each other, watching the water rise fearfully. The subway line, poor thing, sometimes suffered too. We would see the water approaching the tracks and get nervous, wondering if the train could pass. There were times when we were isolated, unable to leave the house, waiting for the water to go down. It was a disaster, but then we managed to clean up the mud, dry things, and life went on until the next heavy rain came to remind us of our fragility. Despite the negative aspects of our area, Dad went to work every day. They had already promoted him to warehouse manager. Mom and I sewed on the side. We already had a large clientele. The children kept growing, studying, playing in the streets of the neighborhood, which little by little was also improving. One afternoon, about 10 years after we had arrived in New York City, I noticed that Grandma Dorothy was strange. She always got up early, made coffee for everyone, religiously prayed her rosary. But that day, I found her walking around the house in her nightgown in the middle of the afternoon, looking for something. "What are you looking for, Grandma?" I asked. "My rosary. I can't find my rosary," she replied anxiously. "But your rosary is around your neck." I pointed to the rosary she never took off. Grandma Dorothy looked at her chest, surprised, as if she didn't recognize the object. Then she smiled shyly and returned to her room. It seemed strange to me, but I didn't give it much importance. It was then that the forgetfulness started to become more frequent. One day, she put the pot of beans to boil and forgot about it on the fire. We only realized it when the smell of burning invaded the house. Another time she went out to buy bread and got lost. A neighbor found her sitting on the sidewalk of a nearby street, crying because she didn't know how to get back home. We took Grandma Dorothy to the community health center. Dr. Roberts, an elderly man already who attended to everyone in the neighborhood, examined her for a while, asking her simple questions that she had difficulty answering. "What's your full name, Mrs. Dorothy?" "Mary Dorothy," she replied, at least getting that right. "What day is it today? What year are we in?" She frowned, confused. I don't know for sure. I'm always at home. All days are the same." "Who is this lady next to you?" He pointed toward me. "It's Catherine, my daughter," she replied, confusing me with my mother. After some more questions, the doctor asked her to wait in the next room while he spoke with me. "Mrs. Hope, your grandmother has a serious memory problem. Here at the Community Health Center, we can't do more complete exams on her, but from the symptoms, it seems to be advanced senile dementia. Is there any medicine, doctor?" I asked anxiously. "Look, to be honest, there's not much to do. We can give her a tranquilizer when she's very agitated, but it won't cure or stop the disease. It would be good to take her to a specialist at Mount Sinai Hospital to do some head studies, but the waiting list is long. It can take months." "But what exactly is this disease, doctor?" "It's when the brain deteriorates with age. It begins with small forgetfulness, then it gets worse. She may forget how to do simple things, like getting dressed, eating. She may no longer recognize you. There's a doctor in the United States studying this. They call it Alzheimer's disease, but here in America, it's still treated just as old age or dementia." I left the health center with the prescription for a tranquilizer and with the referral to Mount Sinai Hospital. I felt as if I were carrying the world on my shoulders. Grandma Dorothy, who had always been our strength, now needed us. Precisely her, who had all the prayers, all the teas, all the advice for any problem. I signed up on the waiting list at Mount Sinai Hospital, but the appointment would be months later. Meanwhile, we would have to manage as best we could. The following months were difficult. Grandma got worse every day. Sometimes she didn't recognize anyone. She called Dad by the name of her husband, already deceased. Other times, she thought I was my mother. She began to lose control of her urine, especially at night. Every morning, the bed would wake up wet. We had to change her sheets, bathe her, an enormous job. We have to buy her adult diapers for her to sleep in, suggested Mom. Adult diapers? Who would have thought that Grandma Dorothy, always so independent, would need that? And they were expensive, another expense that weighed on our already tight budget, but there was no choice. We bought the diapers, and it was a struggle to make her wear them. She cried, said she wasn't a child, that she knew how to take care of herself. Then she would forget she had complained and ask why she was wearing that. The worst was when she had those anger attacks. She would scream, throw things, then cry, ask for forgiveness, without really understanding what she had done. It was like taking care of a child, only much heavier, because it was our grandmother who was there, disappearing a little each day. I split myself between taking care of her, working on sewing, and taking care of the children. Matthew, now 18, helped as he could. He had gotten a job at a printing shop near home. He was responsible. He was dating Maria. He never gave me problems. But Samuel was another story. Samuel was 15, at the most difficult age. He had the same look as his father, as if he was always scheming something. He started hanging out with a group I didn't like, older guys who didn't study or work. He would come home late, smelling of cigarettes. One night, while I was taking care of Grandma, who was restless, Samuel came home late again. Matthew, who was waiting for his brother, worried, went to demand explanations. "Where were you? Mom is busy with great-grandma and you're missing." What a lack of consideration. "Leave me alone," Samuel replied, pushing his brother. "You're not my father." It was like lighting a fuse. Samuel lunged at his brother. The two rolled on the floor of the living room. I ran to separate them while Grandma cried in the bedroom, frightened by the noise. After Matthew left to calm down, I sat with Samuel in the kitchen. He had a cut on his eyebrow. It was bleeding a little. While I cleaned the wound, I tried to talk to him. "What's happening to you, son?" "Nothing," he replied dryly. "Samuel, I know you. Is there something bothering you?" He stayed quiet for a while, then blurted it out. "Why did my father leave? Why did he never look for us? What did you do to him?" The question caught me by surprise. In all these years, Samuel had never spoken to me like that, as if I were to blame. "Your father had problems, son. He did bad things, he had to leave." "What kind of bad things?" Samuel insisted. I didn't know what to answer. How to tell a teenager that his father cheated on his mother with her own sister? How to explain all that sordid story of our past? He hurt a lot of people, made bad decisions. The guys on the street said they saw a man who looked like me downtown, near City Hall. They said it could be my father. My blood froze. "Alex? Could it be possible?" "I'm going to look for him," Samuel declared with determination. "I want to meet my father. I want to know why he abandoned us." I tried to reason with him, tell him it wasn't worth it, that it was better to leave the past behind, but I saw in his eyes the same stubbornness that Alex had. When something got into his head, there was no getting it out. In the following days, Samuel started skipping school. I found out from the neighbor that he was taking the bus downtown almost every day. He was looking for his father, I'm sure. Meanwhile, Grandma Dorothy got worse. There were days she didn't get out of bed, didn't recognize anyone. Mom and I took turns taking care of her. Life was testing me in every possible way. On one hand, Grandma needed constant care. On the other, Samuel, increasingly rebellious, obsessed with finding his father. In the middle of it all, bills to pay, the house to take care of, sewing to deliver. I never imagined that my son Samuel would do what he did. 9 days later, in the wee hours of the morning, I heard the door opening. It was Samuel returning. I sat in the darkness of the living room, waiting. When I saw him, I squeezed him in a hug. Later, when everyone was in the living room, he told everything. He had gone after his father. First, to our hometown, where he discovered that his great-grandfather David had died a year and a half ago. Then he had visited Louis's bar and heard the old stories. He reached Rose, my former friend, and discovered Daniel, the son that Alex had with her, a brother that my children didn't even know existed. My God. My feet lost the ground beneath them. Everyone in the living room opened their eyes in disbelief. "How did Mrs. Rose tell you that?" I asked, unable to believe it. Samuel explained that, according to her, it was a scandal throughout the town. It happened after we left. They only discovered it when the child was born, and Rose's husband, Paul, began to suspect. The baby was born with the clearest blue eyes, identical to his father's. Paul started asking around and discovered that Alex went straight to Rose's house when he left for work. He pressured her so much that she ended up confessing everything. Paul and his father sold the pharmacy, left town, then he came back to ask for a divorce. Now, Rose was a single mother, living with her mother and her son, who didn't even know who his real father was. Matthew, always so controlled, was pale, gripping the arm of the chair. Samuel kept talking, with a broken voice, telling how he had seen Daniel, how he resembled him and Matthew. It was then that I couldn't bear the secrets anymore. I told them about that day of Samuel's birth. How I found Alex and Rose together in her bed. How my water broke right there. How I had to give birth in the bed where my husband had just cheated on me. Samuel, with tears in his eyes, hugged me tightly as he had never done before. In that embrace I felt all his regret, his late understanding of the pain I had carried alone for so many years. We stayed like that, mother and son, sharing a moment of truth and reconciliation that had been postponed for too long. My father, Jack, who was silent in a corner, with that face of someone carrying an enormous burden, decided it was time to end all the secrets. He looked at the children and told them about Lucy, about how Alex seduced my own sister, how he caught them together in his and my mother's bed. He revealed to the children that their cousin Antonio Alexander, whom they barely knew, was in fact their half-brother. Think about the silence in that room. It was heavy as lead. 4 children from 3 different women. That was the legacy that Alex had left behind. A shattered family, secrets buried for years, wounds that never completely healed. Samuel had glassy eyes, as if he couldn't absorb any more revelations. Matthew kept his head down, processing it all in silence, as he always did. My father lit another cigarette, his hands shaking slightly. My mother cried quietly in a corner, remembering pains we thought we had left behind. But the things Samuel discovered didn't stop there. He told us that he had gotten the address of his grandparents, Alex's parents, who were right here, in New York City, in the Bronx. Only he hadn't dared to go alone. He wanted to know if his brother Matthew would dare to go with him. Matthew, always more responsible, at first didn't want to. "What for? To stir up this wound more?" he asked. But in the end, curiosity won out. The following Saturday, off went the two, without telling me anything. When they returned, they brought a story that seemed untrue. They found their grandparents, Mr. Lewis and Mrs. Grace, at a small market stall on East Tremont Avenue. First they went to their house. The neighbors sent them there. They were selling cheap knockoff sunglasses and could barely make ends meet. They lived in an old and small house. According to them, our house was much better. Samuel said the elderly cried when they introduced themselves. "Our grandsons, my God," they repeated, hugging the boys as if they were a lost treasure. They closed the stall right away, took them to the house where they lived, gave them coffee, cornbread, the best they had. They said they did know they existed, but they didn't know the address, because David, Alex's father, told them that we had all left town, without saying where to, after what his son had done to our family. And then came the part that impacted me the most. Alex, according to his grandparents, had gone to the United States 10 years ago. A modeling agency had seen him in a bar in New York City. They thought that with that height and those blue eyes he could be successful abroad. They offered him a contract, ticket to Italy, everything settled. And he left without looking back. "He sends letters occasionally," said Matthew with a bitter voice. "Maybe one a year, never money, although he earned well. just promises that one day he would take them to live there. And in the letter, he even said he would come back to see his children. The elderly showed photos he sent. Alex in New York, Miami, Los Angeles, always well-dressed, smiling, showing the good life he was leading, and we here going through hardships, me sewing day and night to support the children. He has another family there. Mom, said Matthew suddenly. He lives with an American model, has 2 children. The grandparents showed photos of them together, of their children, beautiful, blonde. They couldn't officially marry because he's still married to you here in America, but they live as if they were married. There everyone thinks they are husband and wife. That was like a stab in the chest. While I was killing myself working, raising our children alone, he was there living another life as if we had never existed. He formed a new family while not even bothering to resolve the situation with me. Not even a divorce request, nothing. I felt so humiliated, so ashamed in front of my family. My children came back different after that search, especially Samuel. That blind admiration he felt for his father disappeared like smoke. He realized that Alex really didn't care about anyone but himself. It was good that they found out everything, although I had tried to hide it at all costs. Better the naked and raw truth than a beautiful lie. That agony I had deep in my heart also improved. Not knowing where that man who had destroyed my life was, that still affected me on sleepless nights. At the same time that I felt rage, resentment accumulated over so many years, I was also curious to know what had become of him, if he had suffered like us, if he had repented. 10 years. 10 years since he walked out the door with an old bundle of clothes, promising to send news that never came. 10 years pretending that one day he would knock on the door. Now I knew he would never return, that he had chosen another life, another path that didn't include us. The boys gave their paternal grandparents the address of our house. Mr. Lewis and Mrs. Grace started coming to see us from time to time. At first only on Sundays, then they started coming even to the children's birthdays. The elderly always brought a cake bought at the bakery and some simple little gift. It was strange to see them at first, but little by little we created a mutual respect. We understood each other without talking much. They were simple people who had also been abandoned by their son, like us. Sometimes I would see Mrs. Grace looking at me with moist eyes, as if asking forgiveness for the sins of her son. Grandma Dorothy passed away a few months after all those discoveries. She spent a few days in the hospital, us always taking turns not to leave her alone there, so that if she woke up, she would see a familiar face, in case God performed a miracle. But he didn't want her with us anymore. I think she waited until knowing that we were all on the right track, that the mystery of the father had been solved. At the funeral, Lucy appeared with Antonio Alexander, now a young man of 16. It was the first time we reconnected in so many years. The moment was tense, but necessary. The cousins met, noticed the resemblances, the same chin, the same eyes, the same blood. Lucy was married to Nelson. The two had managed to straighten out their life. They had 2 more little girls, Clara and Elisa. She seemed happy. I never thought I would say it, but I was happy for her. A lawyer looked for me years later, when Samuel was almost 20. Alex had requested a divorce in the United States. I signed without thinking twice. I also wanted to get rid of that name, of that shadow. His mother sent him a letter telling him about the reunion of his children, sent him photos of them, and one day the phone rang at home. We had managed to install a fixed one after 2 years on Telmex's waiting list, and Mrs. Grace had sent our number in the letter. Every time the phone rang, Samuel would get anxious, thinking it was his father. Matthew didn't even care anymore. He had given up. Once, it really was Alex. It was Samuel who answered. I could tell by his face that it was Alex. He turned white as wax, then red, then white again. From the conversation I heard, his father said he couldn't come to live or visit America because of his work, that he was doing very well as a fashion photographer. But he invited Samuel and Matthew to go live with him in Italy. Samuel, who by that time was already 18 years old, talked about nothing else. He walked around the house restless, asking how English was, if we thought he would adapt, if it wasn't the opportunity of his life. I let him choose, and months later he left. His father sent the ticket, the papers, everything arranged. At the airport, Samuel hugged me tightly, but I felt he was anxious to leave, to start a new life. He didn't even look back when he went through the boarding gate. I felt like trash, as if I hadn't been enough, as if all those years raising him alone weren't worth anything compared to the promise of a good life that his father offered him. Matthew, who was already married to Maria and she was pregnant with their first child, was more sensible. "Mom, my place is here. I'm not going to leave my family to go after a man who never cared about me." In the end, Samuel lives like a rich man there with his father. He still calls on the phone, sends photos of trips, of new cars. He married a foreigner, a beautiful girl. He had 4 children, one more handsome than the other, all with the same blue eyes as their grandfather. A curse that seems will never end. I just laugh to keep from crying. Matthew had 2 boys who are the joy of my life, Antonio and Carlos, who filled the house with noise when they were little. I also tried to rebuild my life. I met a divorced man, Claude, handsome, educated. He was the manager of a shoe store at Macy's. I went to live with him in a nice house in the Astoria neighborhood, simple but orderly. He had a daughter, Paula, who came to spend the weekends with us. At first, everything was rosy. He gave me gifts, took me out to dinner, things I had never done with Alex, but I received the same blow as before. He was always seeing his ex because of his daughter, and later I discovered they always slept together. When she came to pick up the girl, I returned to my parents' house at 43 years old, head down once again, with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. After that, I never was with anyone again. I became afraid of men. I know there are good men out there. My father was good to my mother until the last day. My brother Michael is a saint to my sister-in-law Elena. Sometimes I wonder what I would feel if I saw Alex again after so many years. Would I still feel that burning anger, that deep betrayal? Or would I feel nothing at all? There were nights, especially when I was younger, when I dreamed that he walked through our door, begging for forgiveness, and I slammed the door in his face. Other nights, I dreamed that he returned, and I welcomed him with open arms, as if nothing had happened. The truth is that love and hate are 2 sides of the same coin, and for many years I didn't know which of the 2 I felt more strongly. Now, mainly I feel indifference, and that is perhaps the greatest victory of all, to look at someone who once meant everything to you and feel nothing. That is true freedom. Matthew is good to Maria, but unfortunately for me, it didn't work out. What can you do? My grandmother lived more than 30 years alone after being widowed. I can too. The house in Queens finally got paid off. After so much sacrifice, that piece of land was truly ours. Today, at 77 years old, I look back and see that life is made of ups and downs. There are days I wake up with pains all over my body, a consequence of the sleepless nights sewing. But it soon passes when I hear the laughter of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the house on Sundays. Matthew brings the whole family. They spread toys throughout the living room. They barbecue in the yard. Samuel has come to America 3 times in all these years. He never brought his wife. He says she doesn't like planes, but he brought 2 of his daughters, Jennifer and Emily. They are precious, with hair as golden as wheat. Their father's eyes, that blue that haunts me across generations. The little ones speak a mixture of everything, half English that their father taught them, half Italian. Sometimes they spend hours trying to explain something to me, gesturing, laughing at the grandmother who doesn't understand. The last time he came, Samuel surprised me. We were sitting in the yard, watching the children play. Suddenly, he took my hand. He had tears in his eyes. "Mom, forgive me for leaving like that," he said. "I chased after a dream and left behind what really mattered." He told me that after getting to know his real father, living with him, he understood the sacrifices I had made alone. He said he loved me more than anything in this world, that it had taken him years to understand the value of a mother who never gives up on her children, even when they give up on her. I don't know if I believe all those beautiful words. After many years, I've understood that forgiveness is not a destination, but a path we travel every day. Forgiving Alex, Lucy, Rose hasn't erased the scars, but it has eased my soul. The hardest thing has been to forgive myself for having blindly trusted, for having felt insufficient for so long. Sometimes, when looking into the blue eyes of my grandchildren, I no longer see the betrayal, but the continuation of life, the miracle that is born even from the deepest wounds. This hasn't been easy or quick. There are days when resentment returns like a storm, but little by little I've learned to let go, not for them but for me. Today, at my 78 years, I can say that I feel peace, something I never thought possible. The pain hasn't completely disappeared, but it's no longer what defines me. If my story has moved you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel where we share real stories, testimonies like mine, that remind us that there is always hope, even when it seems impossible. As my name indicates, hope is the last thing to lose.